is every day.
All right. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Troutdale Budget Committee for Wednesday, April 19th, 2023. If we could have roll call, please, Sarah.
Yes. Mayor Lauer.
Here.
Councilor Ritma.
Here.
Councilor Caswell.
Here.
Councilor One.
Present.
Councilor White.
Here.
Councilor Wittrin.
Present.
Councilor Glantz.
Present.
Tammy Stephenson.
Present.
Jean Bent.
Present.
Chris Barney. Not here yet. Victoria Rizzo. Present. And Rich Allen.
Here.
Okay, we have called. And it is up to you, Mr. Mueller.
All righty. Well, we'll get launched in here. Hopefully. Okay, looks like it's working, so we've done the roll call. So tonight, what to expect, we're going to touch on our regulatory requirements. We really only have one this evening, which is to offer some opportunity for public comment. We took care of the other hearing stuff last night, but the night before on Monday night. And then we'll continue on with the department reviews. What's on the agenda is when we get done with that, we can take a break and pop over to do the Urban Renewal Agency budget, and then come back and finish up with the general fund recap and forecast. But of course, that's all subject to how the committee wants to proceed. So at this point, I'm going to ask the chair to see about opening a period for public comment and the typical written comments, Zoom and in the room option.
Okay, good evening. At this time, I'd like to open the public comment period for the budget meeting this evening, and this is a public meeting on the proposed budget for fiscal year 2023-2024. Sarah, did we have any comments received?
Yes, received no comments.
And anyone online wishing to testify this evening? Not seeing any. Anyone in chambers? No? Okay. With that, we will close the public comment period.
Okay, so we'll close that. So budget committee duties, we talked on Monday night. So 2 of the 4 that are needed for this budget cycle have been accomplished. Received the budget document and the budget message. We've taken public opportunity for public comment to be considered on both Monday night and tonight. So we have discussed and revised the budget as needed when we get done with the presentations, and then approve the budget and the property taxes is the final step, which then completes the budget committee's work for this particular cycle, and then it moves on to all those other boxes on the screen, and publication in the newspaper, and hearings before the council, etc. So with that, we will launch into departments. We completed the public works ones on Monday night. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. So we can start up with those, but and then I have 2 that I've got to revisit. But we'll start off with some general fund departments. The community development department, got the economic and tourism division, planning division, the public safety, community livability, which is the code compliance function, and then code specialties for all of our building inspections. So page 104 is where the tourism and economic development division is. And this was established 2 budget cycles ago, I believe it was. But anyway, promote tourism, implementation of the town center plan, coordinate the economic development and promotion activities, right in the midst of promotion of all the city events, both ones sponsored by the city and put on by the city. And then, of course, marketing of the Confluence site for the URA. And it's on the next slide. No, I guess not. I was going to say the visitor center is one of the key features that's handled out of that particular area. So as we talk through the FTE increases on Monday night, this is the remaining .25 happens to reside in this particular budget bucket. Existing staff member, just an increase in their hours. Ordinary costs for wages and benefit cost increases. Operation of the depot, the visitor center, and continuing and expanding community events. The depot process or the visitor center process is something we're still getting some familiarity with. Got going in earnest last year, but we weren't really fully kind of recovered from the impacts of things and with COVID and so forth. So this summer, we're looking forward to getting a full sense of hopefully a full tourism season and getting a better idea of what and how that should be staffed and structured. Oops. So that's on page, like I said, on page 104. So any questions about the Tourism and Economic Development Division? I guess I should stop so that the chair can see whether there are any questions rather than being blocked out.
Council
Okay.
plans? No?
I know, it's amazing I don't have questions, right?
No, I was just checking.
All right, we'll charge forward planning division, another general fund division, page 97. Long established division, of course. They're busy with the development volume. They're contending with several challenging state mandates that have been rolling out of Salem over the last couple of years and in the last legislative cycle in particular. And then apparently they're going to be having another hearing tomorrow on one of the challenges, which may give us yet another twist. So there's some significant consulting dollars that are in that budget to try and deal with what we don't quite know is going to be required of us, but we expect that there's going to be some significant code revision imposed upon us by folks in the state agencies. And then, of course, the ordinary salary and benefits cost increases. This is also the department where we have our grant specialist in. I know that was one of Jean's questions early on, and it's there, the salary is there. It's not, the distinction is it's not in the FTE count because the grant specialist is a position that is not a regular status employment position. It is a special category under the labor contract of a limited term employment status with no benefits. So it's not in our FTE count, and no benefits for that individual. They don't work a set schedule. They work it based on what's needed for grant and grant deadlines and meetings like that. Similar to a independent consultant kind of activity. But they've been doing it for more than a year now, and I think Ray is fairly pleased with the return on investment.
Yeah, I think we got about 100-to-1 return on what we spent for it. I mean, we spent about $30,000 so far in this budget year, and we've gotten about over $3 million in grants based on the great work we got from it.
I was under the impression, I could be wrong, that planning got the grants for the park. Is that not true?
Correct. He worked with development. That's the department he worked in, and spearheaded all of our efforts on the grant applications.
That's why he's housed there in that on page 97 or in the planning budget.
Okay. I got something different, but that's okay.
So, any questions on the planning division? Oops. Stop my share so that. So yes, no?
Yes.
Questions on planning? No?
Chief, Mr. Bennett.
Just some clarification on the professional services are like more than doubled.
Yeah, that was what I was mentioning, that we put a bunch of money in there for consulting for the state mandates that are coming down. We don't know that we're gonna need to spend it, but there's these looming challenges related to the CFC rule changes that the legislature is contending with, supposedly another hearing tomorrow. It's also something that the city is party to the multiple county and cities lawsuit against the LCD on the rules that were imposed last year related to the CFC rule changes. And there's some of the ones that have the no parking requirements for types of development and some of those kinds of pieces. You know, we certainly, just like any other budget category, we're only going to spend what we need to spend. We're not going to spend unless we have to. But we're anticipating some challenges in that area, so that's why it was beefed up.
And let me add to that, before Councilor White. I would be shocked if we spent anywhere near that amount of money. But the state is really screwing around with the climate-friendly rules and other mandates coming from the legislature that we don't know yet at this point. I mean, the LCD last summer came out with all these new rules for climate-friendly rules, and they're right now in the middle of already revamping all those rules this week in meetings. So we're just not know what we're gonna get stuck with down the road and have to do and changing our code and stuff. So we're just being conservative and making sure we have enough funds there. But like I said, I'd be shocked if we got anywhere near that amount, quite frankly.
Yes, the question I was gonna ask is, with us litigating it, would we expect this to even be at this point within this next fiscal year?
Well, I just received today from Mr. Chunky, the state's brief in the argument to Court of Appeals. So it's going to be argued in the next couple of months. Yeah, if the Court of Appeals shot it down, but that's a crystal ball situation. It's like, yeah, if the Court of Appeals shoots it down, boy, we're going to barely touch that budget. You're right. But I just don't trust the Court of Appeals sometimes.
They had the opportunity to put a stay on it going into effect, and they deferred doing that and
Until they had the
put
hearing.
it on the docket to require it to grind its way through the process. So that's partly why the council chose to participate in the multiple cities litigation, which, you know, is inching forward. They had filed their brief. I'm not sure, can you use the word brief when it's 114 pages?
I know.
Is that really? But anyway.
Lawyers can.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
lawyers
there's an awful
can.
lot of other cities fighting this battle also.
There's a consortium of counties and cities that came together to fight the CFC rules. Troutdale joined that consortium rather than each individual entity trying to do it separately and wasting lots of money and so forth.
If you're interested,
Is the
anyway,
legislature even in tune with the rest of the state?
there is a bill in the House and the Senate right now that is directing the LCD to go back to the drawing board with the cities and the counties and work better with them before they do something. I just don't know if the legislature is going to have a fix. So essentially, there's three battles going on right now over those rules. It's the modification through the administrative process that's going on this week. There's a legislature that has a couple of bills that might, but who knows what comes out of there. And third is the litigation that's going on right now to try to just whack all the bill, the whole rules. Anybody who wants to get either brief, our city's brief, or the response brief I just got about an hour ago, I'd be happy to send you all of those pages to look at. I will say the brief that we did, the attorneys that was hired, we're kind of like a 3% cost of the whole litigation, very small, but I thought ours was very good. And strategically, our group, we hired an environmental law firm because we don't want to make this about, oh, we're not climate friendly. It's about administrative rules. And so we've hired a firm that has a good reputation of being very great with advocacy for, you know, climate friendly things, so that we get that, you know, whatever that's worth in terms of political push. That it's not about the politics of climate change, et cetera. It's about how they did it. So
And then a few of the other items that are in that category, some of this is, the downtown parking study we've had on there since just before COVID hit. And of course, we keep deferring it because we didn't want to do a parking study during a downturn in activity. So it's finally, the goal is finally to actually get it launched this coming fiscal year. So that one's been there hanging on. The floodplain consulting is, it's something we use if it's necessary, if we have an application that's in that area that requires certain certificates to be allowed to proceed. The Main Streets on Halsey project, long-term ongoing cooperation with the 3 cities. And then the land division for middle housing, that's kind of a carryover from another one of the gifts from the legislature from a few years ago, the 2001, and the requirement for all the middle housing provisions. There's some additional pieces based on the timelines that were established with that have to come into forward in the coming cycle.
Besides
So other
the
than that,
HNA,
planning has nothing to do. They're just sitting there gazing out the window, hoping.
besides the HNA, we have the middle housing division.
So, I'm David Berner.
Oh, you need to come up to a microphone.
Thank you. Please. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm David Berniker. I'm Director of Planning or Director of Community Development. And Chair, what was the question again?
This is in addition to because we had the HNA and I thought we were good till like 26 or something with the HNA.
So the HNA feeds into the middle housing analysis. It's a component of it. So that the HNA doesn't really create policy. It just kind of is more of an analysis. So what we're looking at now with the middle housing is House Bill 2001, as you all might know, allows for duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes in a lot of our single-family zones. What this piece does now is allows for ownership, so allows for land divisions to happen within those larger sites for ownership to happen, if that makes sense. That's the $24,000 that you're looking at on the budget. So it's a piece of middle housing.
Okay. And so what do we have to do?
So we're working with a consultant to create that code to allow that to happen, to allow for the creation of land divisions within these single family zones to happen. So that's the work that we're doing, that we're required to do.
So it's an unfunded mandate. Okay, just checking. Councilor White.
Dave, I have a question for you. Is that for new construction only, or is that going to include existing duplexes and triplexes? Would they be dividable with this new law?
It would be, I think it would be for new construction only, because it would only be allowed on what's existing single family zones now. So what you described as more multifamily zones, if a multifamily zone had a duplex on it, they could further divide it if the land is big enough and met the other development standards.
Commissioner, Councilor. Sorry.
The downtown parking study, I know it's been on there for a couple of years, and the cost was already not sitting well with some of us, and then to almost double, have we expanded the scope or something, or is that all inflation? Can you speak to that?
I think it's really about inflation. Just to get a consultant in to do those projects, it just costs more. Again, that's a budget we've allocated. I'm not sure that we're going to need all that much, but I think it was initially at $60,000. And I think that would be very tight to do a parking study, to check the inventory, to do that type of study under those dollars. So I don't think we're going to need the full 100, but the last number seemed light. This gives us a little bit of wiggle room.
Mr. Allen.
Okay, so on staffing for planning, on planning.
Yes.
What if you were to end up needing an assistant planner instead of an associate planner? It's within the same budget, right? So you have some flexibility there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what's that?
Absolutely, there's flexibility.
Yeah. Yeah. And in fact, the plan is to go out for an assistant, an associate, and a senior, and to see what the talent pool gives us.
Yeah, sometimes you get what comes to the door
That's
instead of
correct.
what you want. Okay, so you feel comfortable with these numbers as far as,
Yes.
we're practically rebuilding the planning department, right?
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
We're taking applications if anybody's interested.
Yeah, fortunately, under the labor contract, we have a job family in the planning group, and so we have the ability, we have more flexibility to bring people in and move them without it being as complicated.
All right.
Yeah.
Good. Sounds like we're covered.
Counselor White?
Yeah, I'm going back to Gene Vance's question on professional services, the 248,000. And my thoughts there are, I almost think that money needs to be spent on the legal side rather than hiring a consultant, because the consultant's gonna work on implementing it and legal's gonna work on fighting it. And I haven't been really impressed with a lot of the consultant work we've been getting. You know, Cascade Partners comes to mind, and the students at Oregon State University. They seem to have more of a regional concept that they try to bring to Troutdale. And a lot of times it really clashes with the works that our committees have been doing and council and planning. So I'm wondering if we should rethink that. I'm looking more to fend off and use home rule and stand up for our city rather than just, okay, hear from a consultant that's used to getting this done in Portland, for example. Just a thought.
Are you saying you want more money on the legal side than what we've got?
Well, we always kind of pat legal, but if I was gonna spend the money, it'd be to fight some of these ordinances rather than hire a consultant to show us how to implement it.
Well, whether we choose to fight any of these or not is something we can confer with Mr. Trumke on, and then he can have an executive session with the council and talk to you about whether it's, what the feasibility is. And we can
Because
then.
we are currently in a fight over this. We've joined that class action lawsuit.
Yeah, that's the one we were talking about earlier.
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. Young?
Councilor White, absolutely. Staff agrees with you. We want to do everything we can to keep people who don't live in this community from telling us how we should live in this community. As a principal, this is true. However, we only have so much weight to swing around in that regard, and we're doing the most that we can. And that's why we are in all this litigation, and we will do everything we can to keep from having to institute rules that are mandated from Salem or local governments like Metro that may be bad for Troutdale. That is something that staff thinks about. We are not generally known for saluting rule propagation that is not good for Troutdale. So we are with you in spirit. We just have to be prepared for winning and losing the battle, whichever happens.
Okay. Well, I think we can.
Thank you, David.
Public safety and community livability, it's part of the police operations. There's no real change in this particular unit. This is Joe, our code compliance officer, and we'll come back to the police budget later on. And then code specialties, which is the building and electrical and plumbing.
Can I have a quick question on that police one?
Is it on police or is it on code compliance?
It's on the police.
We
We'll
haven't
get
got
to that.
police
Oh, you
yet.
haven't got it?
Yeah.
You just have the thing up, so it's coming
It's
back.
part of police budget, but it's strictly related to Joe and the community livability code compliance.
Okay.
We're gonna
We'll
get
get
back
there.
to police.
Okay. Gotcha.
Little later.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. That's fine. I want to deal with questions. So code specialties, that's, the state mandates that it operates separately, that each of the trades have fees that are intended to recover the costs related to doing the building, mechanical, plumbing, electrical, code compliance work for the construction and inspections, et cetera. No staffing changes, ordinary wage and salary increases. We have the ongoing existing IGA with Gresham, who provides us with the building official services, as well as capacity for volume on, particularly on electrical, but to some degree on plumbing and building, et cetera. It's one of those ones that's real challenging to predict the revenue on, because permits come in at the beginning of the process, but the cost for all the inspections is downstream. So you have the revenue in one year and you have the expense over here, and it gets to be kind of all over the place. They haven't been bored and twiddling their thumbs, even through the COVID years. They've had a lot of activity. These charts are also in your book there, page 109. I think I forgot to mention early on, but certainly continuing to have construction happen. This is some of what is, previewing some of that increase in assessed value and property tax revenue that I had on the chart on Monday night, because there's continuing to be additions effectively to our assessed value that will come on stream. And then, of course, the new housing units. Ray touched on that also on Monday night, but continuing to have housing development in Troutdale. Whoop. So I will bring the screen down so any questions on code specialties, the building inspection activities, like I say, on page 109.
Seeing none. Oh, Councilor Bland, didn't see your hand up, sorry.
No worries. Can you put that graph up again? It dropped before I had a chance to look at it.
1 second here. That one, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So we move on to what's referred to as the executive department. Legislative, judicial, legal, general government, administration, and community services. The legislative, excuse me, is the, I wanted to highlight this. This is sort of try and give you context about where you want to spend time focusing your attention in terms of relative impact on the general fund. You'll notice these are the departments that make up the executive department, and so quite a few of them are down near the end. Legislative and solid waste recycling always battle it out for who's the lowest cost, each year. So they're down on that end, and of course, as is typical, the police and public safety is the highest individual buckets on the far end. This year there's a slight change between positions 2 and 3 because of the transfers, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But so legislative is on page 45. It's pretty much straightforward, status quo, ongoing operations. It's where we house the costs for supporting the city council. No meaningful anything not that it isn't a meaningful group, no meaningful changes in the budget. Judicial, municipal court function, the municipal court judge, the court appointed attorneys, and the court clerk. We've had since the budget last year, we've had our prior court clerk took another position closer to home, and so we have we went through a recruitment, have a new court clerk that's come on board. It's coming up to speed, and there's no staffing count changes. There was a change in the staff, but not in the numbers. And then we've continued to see an uptick with the volume for our shared support that we're doing for Wood Village and Fairview for their particularly traffic certs. Legal, this is the bucket for the city attorney and the city prosecutor, which is tied in with the court, but it's the city prosecutor and the city attorney. This is where the fees for Jordan Ramus, Mr. Trumpy's firm is, as well as, his, as well as the other attorneys that are involved. No staffing changes, it's the kind of ongoing status routine. General government it has no staff in it, never has, or anyway, doesn't ever have staff in it. It's kind of where we house those things that don't fit particularly anywhere else. This is where we got the ongoing levy ready payments. I think as not to steal any of Councilor Ripma's thunder, who is our official City of Troutdale representative of the Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District, and to Levy Ready Columbia. I just and know that seeing out on the horizon, I'm suspecting that we're going to be coming to the council with an extension of the Levy Ready Columbia IGAs, just given the timeline of the things that they're working on. This coming year was supposed to be the wrap up of it. It was supposed to kind of wind down, but I suspect it's going to end up dragging out another year or so. Administration, this is where city manager, city recorder, human resources function is all housed. There's no staffing changes here, routine salary and benefit changes, et cetera, routine and ordinary. And then, of course, everybody's favorite department with Troutdale's favorite citizens, and the recreation program, or community services. That's the final division within the executive department. Expenditures for recreation programs, variety of special events. A lot of the city special events we have, is it a recreation event? Is it a tourism event? Is it an economic development event? And many times the answer is yes, it's all three. And so they have involvement and work closely with Marley and the team over in the Tourism and Economic Development Division. No changes there, movies in the park, et cetera. So that is the executive department, all those small divisions that make that up. Any questions, Mr. Chair?
Mr. Bennett.
I know Ray, I had this as one of the questions. Eric, what was the second item that in professional services on page 55 that equaled the 80?
Yep, I have the slide for that actually. Let me just, I want to get this to work here. That was one of my several errors in the compilation of the budget. Here we go. There you go. So if you look in the budget, the up above is what is there on that line, and you'll notice that 40,000 and 2 zero lines add up to 80, which Gene was suspect of. He didn't quite follow that high level of mathematics. And the problem was yours truly, as I was working on trying to get things to all fit on a page and adjusting my print ranges and all that kind of stuff, I ended up losing that line that is highlighted there in yellow before I got the print range set. And so it didn't display it as part of it, but you'll see that that's the other 40 that adds up to the 80. That's those two line items are items that have been budgeted year in, year out. There's nothing new about them. It's just I goofed up on the assembly process for that.
Thank you, sir.
You bet.
I think Gene's question is more about, could we move that 40,000 to the recruitment service for city administrator? Not that we want to get rid of Ray, but I think we should just,
I'm a city manager, sir. That was changed back in 2009 by vote of the citizens during a charter amendment.
So we have another typo in here as well.
Okay.
Oh, well, there's quite a few errors in the budget book, trust me. And then I also have a couple of budget corrections that I'm going to ask the committee to approve a little later this evening. This one doesn't require any correction. The numbers are correct. It was just the description was screwed up by me, so. Okay. I think I get better at this, but anyway, still struggle with it each time. So the next one is finance on page 62, where yours truly resides. No staffing changes, the ordinary wage and salary increases, et cetera, benefit increases. We are continuing to look at increased audit costs, GASB 75, GASB 96, and the other one was that we had to deal with, as well as the single audit requirement for federal funds that we had to use this past year, or the prior fiscal year that completed, and will be subject to again for this fiscal year when we're doing the audit in September and October. Otherwise, it's the same ongoing, et cetera. IT services also falls under the finance director. Same, hardware, softwares, licensing, support for the city, no staffing changes, the ordinary wage and benefit cost increases, the network cybersecurity and so forth that we had. That was it on the slide and on the budget last year. That's something that's continuing. There's mandates coming both from Salem as well as from our insurance carrier, so it's something we're having to work our way through. It's not something we can move quickly on because it can be real disruptive, but that is a continuing part of the puzzle. Then we get to, I guess maybe I should stop with those two and see if there's
Any questions?
Okay. Fire contract, page 80. As I've mentioned before, this is, it's a very big dollar amount, but it's, it's a single line item. It's a single intergovernmental agreement. So do this budget each year. It's real straightforward and simple to get accomplished, even though it's significant dollars. We're heading into the 9th year. And there's back to that, what I was talking about earlier, the two costs. Typically, the fire one is in the second position, and typically, the two of them add up to 45 to 48%. It's a little distorted this year because of the transfers. So the fire contract, it's got its, as you can see, general trend upward as has been the case. Police operations. Come back for a question for you. So on page 67, this is the police activities part of it. It's the ongoing division that we had for years, the 0171. This is where we got the MCSO contract, the community resource deputy contract. It's also where the Bureau of Emergency Services 911 costs also are captured here, and then the code enforcement is the one employee part of the puzzle. Joe, who is our code enforcement officer. So, Mr. Bentz, you had a question about this department.
Yeah, Ray, has he been writing tickets?
Who?
Code compliance, this officer? Has he been writing?
Our resource officer, Nick?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he writes more tickets than anybody else.
Well, remember, I
And he
had
just
a
proud-
real issue with, I wanted, like what I said when the new police chief, or I should say county sheriff was here. But we should be enforcing the laws that are on the books until the legal entity that wrote the law repeals or changes that law. Yeah. And I mean, I'm still seeing 6, 8, sometimes 10 people running red left turn lights on Stark and 257th and everywhere else.
Yes,
I've almost been hit twice.
that is an ongoing issue that we're always talking about in the terms of calls where they could go Nick is doing a lot of work in that regard, but obviously he can't be anywhere all the time.
Right.
I mean, one of the things that goes on a lot, this month already, he emailed me the other day, he's already had 28 cars towed in Troutdale that are broken down, illegally parked, that are just dump places. And I also just spoke with the captain the other day about another deputy who's doing some community outreach about where they could focus their time. And I particularly pointed them to, I'd love to have them spend time at 257th and East Glen River Highway and 257th and Stark. Those are the two biggest places that we see a lot of running red lights. The only problem is it's much easier with 2 officers, a watcher and a chase car, because they're so busy. But those 2 intersections always come up for the problem that you're talking about. So it is never far from my mind or conversation with the sheriff's office.
Great, and can you tell me what happens to the ticket revenue that is generated?
Goes into our income for our municipal court. And there's a lot more in this whole realm. I'm happy to talk to you offline and give you some other more details of things that we're also doing in this regard.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the chart I've updated each year, transition from solo operations to the contracted services. So then the public safety building operations, that's the bucket that we have for this facility. I know one of the questions came in about the utilities, and based on the existing lease agreement, the MCSO pays for 72.5% of the utilities. It shows up in a line item down on near the bottom of page 40.
Thank you.
You bet. Transfers, as I admit, I'm sorry.
I'm just going to skip over tourism and economic development.
What's the first one?
Oh, get it out of.
Yeah.
We can go back there in a minute, or we can actually go back there right now if I can figure out how to manipulate this.
Councilor White?
Yeah, I know we're almost into renegotiation for the police contract. Does that include the lease on this building? Will that be up for renegotiation as well?
I was going to say yes and no. It's not part of the IGA for the contract, but yes, it would also be up for renegotiation because it's 2 separate agreements and they both have the same expiration date. So let me get this to. Okay, so tourism and economic development, page 104, you had a question.
No, I didn't have a question, I just wondered.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood, okay. Back down to, oops. So transfers, page 108. So on that previous page where I showed you, it moved into second place in terms of its size of the bar charts. That's because of the 1.5 million that we're transferring or loaning rather to the Urban Renewal Agency, as well as the final year of the transfer of the community service fee from Amazon into the full faith and credit debt service fund for that payoff. And that's the detail of that is on page 108. We can come back to that as well because it ties in with some of the debt service aspects. So the debt service general obligation bond fund back on page 249. It contains the debt service fund for the general obligation bonds for the construction of this building. It's currently, we're paying off the refunding bonds that was done to lower the interest rate, and we were fortunate with the timing of that. that chart is also way in the back of your book, but shows the relative property tax levies, the dark gray bar at the bottom, that's what's referred to as the permanent rate, the standard rate that the city receives for the general fund. And then that lighter gray bar that kind of stops 2/3 of the way or halfway through the chart, that was the levy for the sewer treatment plant and the payoff of the sewer treatment plant. And then the white one up at the top, and that's the levy component for the remaining general obligation bond, which is for this facility.
Mr. Barney.
So I'm not sure what will be the best way to do this, because I have a question, but it's not about the section that we're in.
Okay, so how about we save that till we're done with this part? Okay. Okay.
Okay. The full faith and credit debt service, we talked a little bit about on Monday night, page 253. This is debt that the city is obligated to repay from any legally available resources, but it does not have a repayment source, unlike general obligation bonds, which is the voters said yes to an additional tax levy. These do not have their own funding source. And there's two pieces in the full faith and credit debt service fund. There's the $5 million that we borrowed back in 2018 to undertake the URA projects. And then, as I mentioned on Monday night, we're structuring in this budget to pay off in full this coming budget in December. The second component in that debt service fund is the full faith and credit borrowing or loan that we have from the Oregon Brownfields Redevelopment Fund. That one we're proposing as part of the budget just to continue to make the required monthly payments. So, questions?
Okay. Mr. Barney, go ahead.
So I wanted to clarify on page 56, the numbers are not adding up there. In the sections about membership and dues and conference/education/travel. And membership and dues seems to be off by almost a couple thousand and not so much on the other ones.
Well, you may just very well have found another one of my errors in the budget. I don't have a answer off the top of my head.
And you said 56?
Yeah, page 56.
Is it 8223 or 8224?
It's both of them. 8223 only adds up to 3,000 and something, and 8224 is not off by as much, it's still off.
Hey, every little bit helps.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's odd. Computer shit. Yeah, it's that's why you're getting a new computer. I know, it's like.
Maybe that software update.
Next column.
Close enough as a technical budget.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm just roughly adding up the next one, the conferences, education, and travel one in my head is kind of running down. Yeah, it looks like it's getting about 20,000 just in the quick in my brain adding up. But the other one does look a couple grand short of the bottom line number.
It looks like that's another one where I screwed up on my print range.
Forget
Yeah, oh, let me see if I can. Oops.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I was close in my head. That's less than.
I don't know if you can actually see that, given how small that is.
750, I'll call that.
It's the line item OCC.
So I think the problem was my print range did not include that line for whatever reason. I don't know how that ended up not being there, but that is the gap. It's a ongoing membership that we have. I don't know, again, me trying to get things to fit on the page, I clearly screwed something up there.
And it does look like on the next line item down below, the conference education, yeah, I got that one.
Yeah, this one
About
is
800 missing in there somewhere.
It's the OCCMA conference for 750.
Oh, is it? There it is. That's weird.
Because that got missed in the book. Yep.
Good catch.
okay. So somehow I don't know.
And what was the
I'm getting nervous about that.
1780?
Cascade Employers Association, an organization we've been members for quite a while. Yeah, the totals are correct. The line item detail is, again, my print range was off, so I'm glad the total numbers were not. There wasn't a formula problem. Other questions?
Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Bent?
Yeah, Eric, just a quick clarification. On 108, you had on the general fund transfers, the 1.5 million loan to URA. Is that our portion along with the 2.7 to do the Confluence Trail?
Yes, that's the intent, is that's to provide the required matching funds that in order to comply with those two grants.
That's what I thought.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Other questions?
Well, based on the agenda, Mr. Chair, I would suggest a short break and then come back and do the urban renewal budget.
Yeah, so how about we take a break? 7 minutes too quick, probably go 10. Let's take a 10-minute break and we'll come back to the Urban Renewal Agency. Okay, we're in recess until 7:03. We'll just recess and go right into the urban renewal.
Well, I think we were on a break from the other one, so we're just going to convene this. We just need a roll call and.
Hey, and good evening. At this time, we are going to convene the Budget Committee meeting for the Urban Renewal Agency for the City of Troutdale for Wednesday, April 19th, 2023. You have roll call, please.
Yes. Chair Lauer.
Here.
Director Ritma.
Here.
Director Caswell.
Here.
Director One.
Present.
Director White.
Here.
Director Wittrin.
Present.
Director Glantz.
Present.
Tanny Stephenson.
Present.
Jean Bent.
Here.
Chris Barney.
So,
Victoria Rizzo. Rich Allen.
Here.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Chair, we're going to put you back to work again. Since we're in a new separate legal entity budget committee, we're going to check off the box to ensure that we're complying with the local budget law and give the opportunity for public comment on the Urban Renewal Agency budget, standard disclaimers, the 3 parts written Zoom comments in the room. So I will turn it back to you, sir.
Good evening, and at this time, we will open the public comment period on the budget, proposed budget for the Urban Renewal Agency for the City of Troutdale. Any citizen may speak to an item relative to this budget. Any comments received?
I have no comments.
Anyone online wishing to speak? Seeing none. Anyone in chambers wishing to speak? No?
Hundreds in the chamber.
Quiet for a change. And this time I'll close the public comment period for the Budget Committee for the Urban Renewal Agency.
All righty, well, we'll charge forward into the Urban Renewal Agency budget. This is my placeholder. I didn't have any specific follow-ups that were requested for the URA. Recap, the Budget Committee proposed budget for the Urban Renewal Agency for 2023-2024. The two funds, the Riverfront Development Fund and the Debt Service Fund. Those are the requirements in the proposed budget as we covered on Monday night, $7,044,000 and the $222,000. Been no changes since Monday night or what was in the proposed budget or any of the questions we received. So it's a question of, is there any committee discussion before we would move to motions?
Any discussion on the budget?
All righty. We'll charge forward then. So the motions. So the staff requests a so moved motion that the Urban Renewal Agency of the City of Troutdale Budget Committee approve a levy for the Troutdale Riverfront Renewal Plan area for the 2023-2024 fiscal year in the maximum amount of revenue that may be raised by dividing the taxes under Section 1C, Article 9 of the Oregon Constitution and ORS Chapter 457, Mr. Chair. So moved. Second.
Okay. We have a motion by Mayor Lauer, second by Councilor Ritma, that the Urban Renewal Agency for the City of Troutdale Budget Committee approve a levy for the Troutdale Riverfront Renewal Plan area for 2023-2024 fiscal year, and the maximum amount of revenue that may be raised by dividing the taxes under Section 1C, Article 9 of the Oregon Constitution, ORS 457. Do we have any discussion or questions on the motion? None? Fire away.
Okay. Tammy Stephenson,
Yes.
Chair Lauer,
Yes.
Jean Bent,
Yes.
Director Ritma,
Yes.
Director Caswell,
Yes.
Chris Barney,
Yes.
Director One,
Yes.
Director White,
Yes.
Victoria Rizzo,
Yes.
Director Wittrin,
Yes.
Rich Allen,
Yes.
and Director Glantz.
Yes.
Okay, the easiest motion passes unanimously.
Okay.
On a roll now.
Mr. Chair, staff requests a so moved motion that the Urban Renewal Agency of the City of Troutdale Budget Committee approve the proposed budget for the 2023-24 fiscal year in total as submitted. So moved.
Second.
Oh, she got you.
Close second to the second.
Motion by Mayor Lauer, second by Victoria Rizzo, that the Urban Renewal Agency for the City of Troutdale Budget Committee approve the proposed budget for 2023-2024 fiscal year in total as submitted. Any discussion on the motion? Councilor Glantz.
Yeah, I have a question. Last night we talked about if we needed extra funds, like if we needed to put a road through, that those we'd work on that later. We don't have to have anything in this budget to address that, as long as we stay within the legal limits of what we can borrow or use.
Well, I guess the wide-ranging parameters of what you're asking, it's what we would have to do. We'd have to see what it was that's being proposed or requested of us, whether I could say, yes, we could do it and it would fit, or no, it's outside of it. But since we don't have anything specific, there really isn't anything that I would suggest, adding or adjusting to the budget structure.
No, I was actually asking if we do need to go get more money for whatever reason, does approval of this block that in any way?
Oh, no.
Thank you.
Not at all. In fact, this budget has for years had the maximum amount of the TIF that's remaining to be borrowed budgeted as a loan from the city. We just never loan, the city just never loans it that much. So if we needed then to loan more, we could. And then if there was a revenue source outside of that we needed to get to, we could make we could go through the supplemental budget process if need be mid-year.
Perfect, thank you.
And typically, like if we were going to build a road or get some C4 to blow a hole through the outlet mall or something, that would be a situation where the city would be doing it, not the Urban Renewal Agency anyhow.
Right after he gets his explosive certificate renewed.
Thanks.
Do that. Any other questions? You good, Sandy? Okay. No other questions on the motion, Sarah?
Ready? Chair Lauer,
Yes.
Jean Bent,
Yes.
Director Ripma,
Yes.
Director Caswell,
Yes.
Chris Barney,
Yes.
Director One,
Yes.
Counselor White,
Yes.
Victoria Rizzo,
Yes.
Director Wittrin,
Yes.
Rich Allen,
Yes.
Director Glantz,
Yes.
Kenny Stapleton.
Yes. Okay, that also passes. One budget out of two in the books.
So the staff want to thank the board of directors and the citizen members of the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee for your continued support during the budget process and throughout the year, and I'd like to thank you for your efforts and involvement. We would also encourage you, since I know for Sarah this is recruitment season, if there are people that you want to suggest serving on city committees, I know we're always looking for folks to fill an application out that's available online, and there's also some hard copies out there. Just a side plug. So with that, Mr. Chair.
Motion to adjourn the Budget Committee for the Urban Renewal Agency.
I move we adjourn.
One second.
Okay. He got you that time, Victoria. So motion by Counselor Ripma, second by Chris Barney to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we are adjourned and we are back in to the Budget Committee for the City of Troutdale.
Okay, so break, so come on. So we'll move, recap of the general fund. Oh, some follow-up items. So I had this later in the presentation, but we already addressed it with, for Jean. So budget corrections, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting Monday night and have mentioned each year, the budget always has errors in it that I have created. Some of them it's easier for me to fix than others. Some of them I don't find till later. Some of them other folks are able to point out for me. But in any case, a couple of them tonight that I'm going to ask you to adjust the budget for. So on the solid waste recycling, we covered this on Monday night. This was the area where we had the 0.1 to 0.3 allocation. This is one of two places where I just completely missed an item in doing the budget, preparing the budget book. And so I'm going to ask you to adjust the budget, but House Bill 5202 from the prior legislative session, the legislature gave Metro $10 million to distribute to jurisdictions within the Metro region for trash and sanitation services. The city and Metro got an IGA for the House Bill 5202 funds. We were allocated $230,000 for our approved project, which had to comply with the legislative intent and Metro's requirements, et cetera. The trash pickup, debris cleanup, abandoned vehicles removal, provision of dumpsters, trash bins, related contractor costs, and so forth. I have captioned litter removal, which was one of the primary objectives that we had with it. The IGA, the city council approved back in, it was either the last meeting in August or the first meeting in September last summer. And we entered into an agreement with Cultivate Initiatives, a litter patrol agreement, specifically for this purpose. And so it wasn't in this year's budget because it happened after this process a year ago. So I screwed up when we had this item to continue for this coming year. I failed to have a place to put it properly. So there is a line item called Other Contracted Services on page 78 that is missing $45,000 entry. And that boils down to this $810.19 times 52 weeks. That's our contract with Cultivate Initiatives for the litter patrol work that we have contracted with them to do. I want, I guess, to clarify, the current term of the IGA with Metro expires this June 30th. Now, we're continuing to have, there's a provision for it to be extended. Of course, it has to be agreed to by both parties, so we're continuing to kind of lobby with Metro to do that. But the intent here is whether Metro continues or not, we've seen the benefit in the community for this activity, and so we want to be able to continue it with Cultivate Initiatives, regardless of whether we can get the IGA with Metro extended. And so as a consequence, I need to fix this oversight that I had on page 78.
Mr. Barney?
So on the page 78 one, so the 45,000 was for letter/dump site cleanup. Was there a number that you go with the rate review services?
That's one that is used at every, I forget what the cycle is, when we have to do the rate review under the franchise agreement with Waste Management. And there, I believe it was done last fiscal year, so it wasn't due. There's a timing item, and then there's also a cost or an inflation item where they can request it. But in any case, we don't anticipate needing to do that for this coming fiscal year. So in prior years, there's been money on that line item.
Okay, so 0 this.
Other questions on that? Councilor White?
Yeah, just kind of, goes back to what Gene was talking about, writing tickets. I see people littering along the Sandy River and in our parks, and I hate having to pay for someone else's bad behavior. I'd like to see some tickets written for that type of thing, especially in a waterway. It's very expensive to remove that stuff once it's down a steep embankment and that sort of thing. Just a thought.
Okay, we'll pass that on to Ryan Legura, who's our environmental specialist who manages this grant and this contract for us.
How long is that contract for? How deep are we into it, and how much more do we have in it?
Well, it expires June 30th of this year.
Okay.
So if we can get Metro to extend, that'll provide the funding for it, and we're waiting to hear on that. And then we'll go back to Cultivate Initiatives and see about doing a contract extension with them. But we're trying to get our ducks lined up first. But both of them at the moment terminate June 30th. Okay, so that's one. My other screw up is back on page 121 in the water fund, and the operations and maintenance equipment, I completely missed the line, whereas the one here, it was there and it was blank. I completely even missed putting that line in on the water fund and left poor David high and dry, which you shouldn't be when you're in the water fund. But in any case, it's for bell encapsulating repair clamps of all sizes, which of course makes perfect sense to me. So I had to go find something that explained what the heck are you talking about, David? These are important components that they need when they have to address particularly leak repair or when they've had to access, additional service into a larger line. And I don't know, the mayor may be able to speak credibly to this beyond me.
It's a relatively cheaper repair than digging up a longer section of that water line and cutting out. That connection piece inside that red blown up view is called a bell and spigot. It's where two lines are connected to make a joint. Cutting that out and throwing in new pipe is more expensive than just digging up a smaller hole and repairing it with a bell repair line. So that's what that is.
So that's what David had intended to have in the budget that I goofed and missed. So on the water fund, on that line, equipment 8219, the bell encapsulating repair clamps of all sizes, there's a missing $50,000 entry. And this is an item that, okay, well, we buy these, but they don't expire like, fruit that goes bad. They can, go on the shelf, and if we don't use them, then we use them the next fiscal year. Doesn't necessarily mean that we're gonna go out and buy 50,000 of them, dollars worth of them up front. But as they deal with the leak repairs and other issues, they obviously need to have the right equipment. So that was my.
Mr. Barney, that one?
It's on page 120.
Yep.
It's in my book.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I get the line wrong? I'm sorry.
Yeah, page 29 is the line by line.
121 is the start of the water fund.
Oh, I see.
It's actually on page 128 is where it is. I apologize.
129.
129. Okay.
Oh, yeah, excuse me, 129, right? I can't even get the page numbers right.
Is the total still correct on that page?
No, it's $50,000 short. That's the addition that I'm requesting here. And so the staff requested, or specifically the finance director requested, budget corrections for the items identified in the proposed budget process, is to add that $45,000 to the 01788221 other contracted services for the litter patrol contract, and then to add the $50,000 to the 03008219 maintenance and operations equipment, and then the corresponding balancing entries to unappropriated. So for discussion of the committee, staff requests a motion that the City of Troutdale Budget Committee amend the proposed budget and approve the staff requested budget corrections as presented.
You want a motion for these two?
I would like a so moved motion as presented there.
Okay. Second. Motion by Victoria Rizzo, second by Mayor Lauer. The City of Troutdale Budget Committee amend the proposed budget and approve the staff requested budget corrections as presented. So this would be for the two.
Right.
That we're discussing only. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Sarah?
Okay. Tandy Stephenson.
Yes.
Okay. Mayor Lauer.
Yes.
Jean Bent.
Yes.
Counselor Ripma.
Yes.
Counselor Caswell.
Yes.
Chris Barney.
Yes.
Counselor One.
Yes.
Counselor White.
Yes.
Victoria Rizzo.
Yes.
Counselor Wittrin.
Yes.
Rich Allen.
Yes.
And Counselor Glantz.
Yes.
All done?
Okay. All right.
Okay, moving forward, the general fund forecast. So the assumptions, just quickly, that go into making the chart, same assumptions that I went through with you in the December mid-year budget committee meeting. PERS rate increases at each of the bienniums, COLA increasing the 5%, the healthcare also, materials and services, 6%, 4%, 3%. Fire contract continuing to grow at the maximum rate allowed for the remainder of 2 years of the contract. And then, as I said in December, I put a 10% bump on renewal for the new contract period for both the police contract and the fire contract. Of course, we've never renewed the police contract, but that is the history of how the fire contracts have been renegotiated. There's typically been a true-up, as it's been referred to, at the renewal. That true-up is usually a fairly big step, and so the agreement, at least in the past, has been is to step it up over a couple of years and then move into a rail inflation-based increase. So that's just what I've used for the assumptions. Property tax growth, incorporating the enterprise zone, expirations, et cetera. So this was the same chart we went through on Monday night. So the ending fund balance projected to be at the 5.4. So that's where we go at the top point down to the 5.4. Again, that assumes that everything that we're planning happens, which that never is the case. We have another hailstorm like we did this afternoon.
Yeah.
So is this the December mid-year budget? Am I in the time warp or? Wow. Right. Anyway, so that's the forecast. I mean, I don't expect it in reality to have that much of a drop down, but I'm to be consistent in terms of how it's presented. And then, as always is the case, as we looked at the chart on Monday night, we never get down to these lower levels the further out you go. So in summary, the proposed budget, just as I said on Monday night, allows us to continue allocating the limited funds to support the city goals and objectives, undertake the significant expenditures associated with our urban renewal plan area, contribute to the ongoing existing services, sense of stability and continuity, maintain those essential service levels, invest in the infrastructure, capital needs, and city's goals and objectives. So at this point, Mr. Chair, it is committee discussion.
Okay,
Because the slides I have left are motions.
oh boy. Okay, I guess one of the questions I had, what used to do an optimistic and a baseline and a pessimistic.
I stopped doing that about 4 years ago.
Right, and so theoretically, like, the pessimistic would be if we spent everything that was in the budget, okay?
I think that was the baseline.
The baseline,
I believe so.
okay.
But I don't remember. I would have to go back and haven't looked at that for several years. It just made the charts and graphs a bit too busy. So.
Okay. So I was just, through my head, I was just going, okay, so what if we spent the money in the budget that we've appropriated theoretically and the contingency, that would put us at 2.4 million at the end of the next fiscal year, right? That's our unappropriated balance. And we need to hold, I'm just being theoretical here, we need to hold 2 million minimum to get by. So that would mean that the next budget that we would have could only have a complete loss of $400,000. But if I follow the forecast, we would drop more than that.
Well, I don't know if this chart will help or make it worse, but I'll try to give some show. Come on. So it's something that we've looked at before in other years about the deficit, what comprises it, how do you get back to even, et cetera. So, we have this preliminary deficit number. We add back the 3 million in contingency. The rest of the items I have got listed there are generally, not 100%, but generally non-reoccurring or one-time or however you want to describe them. Transfer to the debt service fund, this is the last year we're gonna do that. It's, because we're gonna pay off the debt, so that's 1.7 million. The $1.5 million loan to the Urban Renewal Agency, well, we might do that in a subsequent year, but we won't do it for that specific purpose because we've already loaned it this coming budget year for the trail. We might do other things with the urban renewal, but we really don't know what that is yet. Now, to be fair, I then have that negative 1.5 because I didn't want to just show one side and because we're borrowing from the Parks SDC fund that 1.5 million for the general fund to turn around and loan to the agency. So that's why I'm showing it going back out. Otherwise, we'd have a nice big, $1.4 million surplus in the general fund. That wouldn't be fair representation. And then we have the capital outlay in the Parks Department, which we had the very large capital outlay budgeted this year that an awful lot of them are carryovers. There's also a number of them that we don't get to each year, so I don't really expect all of that to get spent. But that's part of what gets you to that number. Facility side, the number isn't anywhere near as big, and particularly since we've gotten all past pretty much the depot remodeling, that was the big one that we had for the last couple of years. And then the large amount that we've got budgeted for those professional services to deal with all those state mandates. I say they're not reoccurring. We hope that they're not reoccurring, but we don't really control Salem. So anyway, that gets me back to, quote, essentially a break even. Again, I don't expect all of those, particularly in the capital and the professional services stuff, to get spent in the coming year. The transfer to the debt service fund that one is going to be pretty close to that number. It's a little bit dependent on what we get from the Amazon community service fee. The 1.5 will happen, but there would be that number rather. So anyway, I don't know whether that helped or made it worse, Mr. Chair.
I don't think it ever makes it worse. It's just, and it's just, and I guess I'll just speak, which I never have a problem doing. But one of the things that happens is the committee's authorizing to the council and to staff to spend this money. And it's just making sure that we're okay with that, right? We haven't had a situation where it's been spent. But I'm just looking at it, I'm like, so let's say things don't go well. If things don't go well and we're at a $2.4 million ending fund balance, I think we're in trouble. And that's all. I'm just wondering how, others feel about it and what the thoughts are. I mean, it's hard because you look at this last year, right? We projected a $1.9 million deficit, and that was 11.26 of what was appropriated. And this year we're projecting 6.3, and that's 28.7. So it's just, we're just kind of into uncharted water here a little bit. And we have a lot of things going on, and I'll just say, I think that, if there's a year we would spend it, it would probably be this year. I could be wrong. Mr. Bennett.
The most feasible part, and about half of what you're talking about, the 6.3 deficit, is 3 million in contingencies. if you took that out, because there's already 2.5 million already in contingency, do we really think we're gonna spend 5.5 million in contingency is on the already?
Question for you, where are you seeing the 2.5 million? I'm not seeing that one. I know there's 3. I didn't see 2.5 anywhere.
I think you're combining two different silos, to use Ray's terms, because they're different budgets. The 3 million is strictly related to the general fund.
Right.
All of the, well, I should say almost all of the funds have a contingency line item, but
Right,
they're
and it is,
separate.
and it is 2 different funds. In the River Fund Development Fund, there is a 2.254 million.
Because of the park, yeah.
So there is some contingency to work with if we had some expenses. Is that, am I correct or wrong?
No.
Well, yes and no. There's contingency there, which we have to start talking about. There's a difference between the appropriation authority, the authority to spend money, and the reality of having cash to spend. And in the case of the Urban Renewal Agency, we have much more appropriation authority built in than we actually have cash. So in order to be able to transfer any of that contingency in the urban renewal area into into a road or into, additional money for the trail or something else, there's gonna have to be more money come from the general fund into into the urban renewal agency in order for there to be any cash for it to actually do anything with that. So it can get confusing, and I apologize.
Yeah, I just saw it there and I thought, well, we got that contingency.
Yeah, in order to actually, if we wanted to make full use of that 2.4 million, we need to borrow it from the city so that it could then be used. And we then also, that's why I've got 3 million, not for that dollar amount, but that's why I've got 3 million in that contingency line, because I also have to have appropriation authority in the separate general fund in order to be able to make the loan. And again, I don't expect us to spend that 3 million unless we get, I think, an opportunity with the potential development that the council decides they want to go forward with, and that we don't want to tell the developer, well, no, you got to wait a year. Right. And again, the contingency, that's entirely at the control of the city council. They can decide whether they want to move forward with transferring money from there or not.
Councilor Glantz.
Yep, this is the time we can actually make like our comments.
Yes, absolutely.
I have a list here. So Monday night, we heard how there's likely going to be a recession this year. We also heard how in 2008, we had a lot more employees than we do now, and went back and looked at some of that, and it looks like there was a pretty significant downsizing the city had to do, and I'm guessing that was because of the Great Recession. In the budget narrative, we hear Eric telling us that, we've got some pretty significant PERS increases, health insurance increases. It's not like it's going to go down. And then, those graphs, and I know those graphs are, worst case scenario, I guess, but it still gives me a lot of concern. And then we've heard how if, we do need to get a road through the outlet, that could come out of contingency. But yet contingency wasn't part of the budget when we saw that graph with money going down. So in fact, those downward trends could be real. So my concern is we're kind of looking in some instances at the trees, and Jean, you have my respect. I mean, some of that line item stuff you did is amazing. But I think we should also look at a little more big picture, that maybe we're missing a couple key things, that we have police and fire coming up. And it's quite possible that in order for them to contain costs, because I know Gresham was putting out bonds and everything else, trying to get more voter money, we may end up with, yeah, we'll keep your costs the same, but your coverage won't be as good. And right now the coverage is pretty bad on fire and response times. We've seen that. We have police coming up. I feel like we need to be a little more cautious right now, because it's not like we're going to have some sudden influx of money, especially if we hit a recession, that we should be a little more careful about what we can save. And, you know, we have the URA, and that needs to get completed. If we hit a recession, maybe it gets paused. We end up having to come up with cash to cover any kind of expenses, or I think we were going from just interest payments to, you know, it was different. We have some expenses in URA coming up, quite possibly. And then the other thing I think we should address a little bit is in tech, we call it scope creep, where over the years, there's a lot of really nice things that we do, but they're not necessarily needs, they're wants. And as we look at this big picture on the budget, maybe we've got a little bit more of want than need in there. You know, I don't want to be in a situation where we get into these fire and police negotiations and we don't have the funding to do what we need to do. And, you know, I've also heard, you know, the full argument, don't worry, we don't spend that. But, you know, this is one of those where I've been in the room when we were redoing the code and planning, and we were 100% told, you know, no worries, will never happen, that if there's any kind of controversial issue, we will always shoot it up to planning. And it's not that we want planning to make changes, but we want to allow the option for public. And we recently had an instance where we asked for a controversial and we were flat out told, no, people change, promises change. Eric and Ray, there's no guarantee they're going to be the ones that actually administer this budget. So I don't want to just complain. I heard something earlier that kind of spurred an idea. What if we take a lot of what I call line item, and I think you call them appropriated, some of those spending and put that into contingency? And the reason for that is that way, anytime that we're actually dipping into our reserves, it's a public hearing. It's not just, oh, this is how it worked out. It's actually something the public can comment, be aware of. You know, we're not doing anything in the background. It's you know, the budget committee's responsibility to edit a budget as needed. I don't know if that's something that we should go through and start saying, oh, here's, you know, we don't need this, we don't need this. And, you know, instead of 9 trucks, maybe we need 8 trucks. Or if that's something that we could get some direction on. But just overall, I think there is way too much, I don't want to call it wiggle room. There's too much possibility that we can have some pretty significant expenses coming up and we won't be able to cover them.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Gill?
Yeah, I absolutely hear what Councilor Glantz and Chairperson Tanny are saying. And under the 4 corners of this document, it can seem a little worrisome what the numbers are. And yes, it looks that way every year. You know, the chairperson brings out his concerns every year, and they're all legitimate. And it is a little concerning, and I understand Councilor Glantz's concern that we don't have a crystal ball for the future. And she's right, we don't. Things can happen that upset the apple cart. One thing that is really important about this is that come July 1st, we don't spend the whole budget. I don't buy all the trucks, we don't do all the projects. They are spread out through the year, and we keep track of, is there any disruptions in the income? Is there any disruptions in what we expected would happen? We have a chance to pivot and stop spending. I mean, what we did during the COVID year is, you know, COVID hit right when you were approving the budget for 2021. We really didn't have a basis for, you know, reducing the budget, but one of the things I said then, and we just didn't buy any vehicles till after the first of the year, just to see what COVID was doing to our income. And then we knew, which usually comes after November 15th, we get a big chunk of the property taxes. So it is not something that we can't pivot on during the budget year if anybody has any concerns, or if the council raises any concerns at a meeting or off a meeting to staff to say, hey, I'm concerned. And so we can throttle back. I mean, certain things like the dog park as an example, you know, we're doing the fence this budget year, it's in the budget. Next budget year, we have money to finish up some of the things. Maybe we don't finish it. It doesn't have to get finished next year if we're seeing a concern. If we see that we're struggling with income, then the consultant assistance for the development, I look over at David and said, David, sorry, we're not gonna do these projects this year because, you know, you may have a ton of money in your budget, we're gonna have to cut it back. I guess, you know, as opposed to using the argument, well, heck, we've never overspent before, we always spend under, you know. I will say that your staff, for good or for bad, we are very conservative in that we underestimate income and we overestimate expenses. Whether you can call it, I guess, under promise, over deliver, which I always tell people is always the way to go. It makes you look better in the end and you have fewer disappointed people when the project is all done or the budget's all done. And yes, you are correct. If Eric and I get hit by a meteor, you know, July 2nd, that is a problem. But then again, council still has the authority to pass resolutions, correct the city manager to cut spending. And if they don't, you fire them. That's what you can do. So there are ways to address this in terms of monitoring any concerns or problems that might affect our income. There are ways that we can internally reduce the speed of spending just to see how the year goes, which we're always open to, because like I said, nobody runs out on July 1st and spends a bunch of money. So I appreciate these concerns. And, you know, it's one of those things we've had before. If you want to take Ed Trumke's no, it's not his budget, but $240,000 for legal services and say, you know, we've never really gone over 150. Let's make it 150. And if you want more money, come back later. You know, you could save 90 there. You could tell David's budget, no, instead of 248 for consultants and hiring some contract help, make it 200. You say, if you want more, come back later. You could do that. And I'm not saying that it's outside the realm of what the budget committee may want to do. And maybe it's a minor thing to say, but that just makes more work later on if we do come back. But if we're right on these like we are, we're not going to spend it anyway, so we probably won't come back. So in all this process, all I can say is that we understand your concerns. There would be nothing worse for Eric and I to do than to come back here in next December for the half-yearly meeting or the budget committee meeting and look at these numbers and going, oh my goodness, we were not paying attention, and my goodness, our income's way down, our expenses went through the roof, we weren't paying attention, and that's not what we want to sit in front of you and do. I'm looking over at Eric, and I know he agrees with me that is the worst place for the people you hire to manage these finances is to come in and say, gosh, I'm sorry, we spent all your money, now what are we going to do? That's not going to be something that we would allow to happen, because we will be covering the ship. And if anybody, again, every month we run a report on percentage of spending on every single line item in all these 262 pages. We track the income every month. If anybody on the budget committee wants to ask Eric or I to, hey, can I come in and look at those things? Love to let you look at the same numbers we look on. If there's any concerns, you know Eric and I well enough that if somebody raises a concern we'd like to talk about in a public meeting, we'll put it on your agenda. Council agenda. So I'm not telling you not to do some things to cut some of these line items if that helps you approve the budget. But if you don't, know that we pay attention to what's happening, and we don't want to be in a situation, because as I told this committee, every year, we know PERS is going to be bugging us for the next 5 or 6 years for higher rates. We know the contract is coming in July 1st to 2025, which is 2 budgets down the road. The fire and police contracts are coming up. As I alluded to earlier, Monday night, in 24-25, we are going to get a nice bump of well over $1 million more in property tax income above and beyond the statutory 3% increase, because in that budget year. Amazon comes back online, the Troutdale Cubes comes back online, and Fox Ridge will be paying property taxes by that time also. So it's that increased development that does help us above the 3%, which keeps us from being in situations like other cities are. So I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. I understand your concerns, and they are legitimate, and we do care about those concerns. But I think there are other ways of handling it than trying to go through and make never so, oh, let's go through it and let's see which one of these, I don't know what the number is, 2,500 line items we want to shave down a little bit to make that bottom line number. That would, I guess, be the process you'd want to go through. So
My point is that I think we should be in savings mode rather than in spending mode. I think that there is scope creep, that there's a lot of things in the budget that would be nice to have, but aren't necessarily needed, when in fact we should be shoring up our reserves. So how we get there, open to suggestions. I mean, I have just that one, so. But yeah, I don't want to see a graph that's going down. I want to see a graph that's flat or increasing, preparing for what we know is coming at us.
I will comment, that graph is, honestly, it's always wrong, because it is based on a conservative negative assumption that we didn't make any adjustments. So we did Monday night, we brought the graph from 2019, and it was wrong every year in terms of the direction the ending fund balance was going, because of the nature of, because this budget looks worse than the actual application of the budget ends up being. But I appreciate that.
I
Mr.
guess
Allen?
the only thing that I would add to the comments is that, you know, we're going to be at a peak number. You know, the graph has gone up to 9 million. And the proposed budget, yes, it deliberately spends down that balance. And staff is proposing that because we are attempting to implement what we understand is council direction. Now, if council direction is now where Councilor Glanz is, then fine, we can not do the projects. We can not spend money on the URA. As I said in the very beginning in the cover letter that went out with the budget, this was going to be a year where we were spending significant resources to pursue the goals related particularly to the Urban Renewal Agency. There's nothing that has a gun to our head that says we have to do that. That's a policy choice. And staff is, you know, we need to be policy neutral. It's our job to implement. We can recommend, we can suggest, we can try and bring our expertise when there are discussions, but, you know, I have 0 votes, you know, so if council is persuaded to Councilor Glanz's direction, then certainly we can not spend the money. It's just, but of course you can't pursue the goals either. So it's.
For the record, was included as one of our one of the reasons we may need some cash in the future. I'm not opposed in any way to spending money on URA. URA, Public Works, Fire and Police, those are my priorities. Not necessarily in that order.
Not what?
Not necessarily in that order.
Thank you. Mr. Allen?
I didn't understand that one. I'm sorry, what? Not necessarily what?
She said not necessarily in that order. Oh. She said URA, Public Works, Fire and Police.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, so,
Mr. Allen?
I kind of mentioned this the other day. When I'm looking at the budget, I saw 3 main things, 3 main expenditures that were different in this budget than previous budgets. And I saved the budgets from every year I've been on the budget, even some from when I was out in the audience. And so I look back at them from time to time. And what I see here is I see that there are costs per employees going up that are predominantly affecting the number that are outside our control. I see projects in there that we've been wanting the city to do for a long time. However, hearing Councilor Glanz's cautions, perhaps we do take a look at those projects, do a tabletop exercise. This would be more for management. As to what are the basic, if the economy were to turn down tomorrow and we had to make some tough decisions on that tabletop exercise, what would be the ones that are basic to the function of the city, right? That we just need to be doing to keep the basic services going and healthy. And then the last one, of course, is contingency, which may or may not be spent, but the contingencies seem to be predominantly towards new development. Now, this isn't too far off from what we did with Amazon, right? You had the Port of Portland and the City of Troutdale putting time, effort, and money into preparing for Amazon to come in. And that was a cost to us, but it had a good ROI, a good return on investment, to where the city has had previous graphs that were downturned. And those downturns that you see in Eric's graphs got pushed out because of the increased revenue we got from the development. So, in other words, I'm saying the development, if it's got a good ROI, we need to continue with it. Because that's what does push that downturn in our budget out a few years. But I'm all ears if there's specific budgetary items that people are more concerned about that they want to save on. That's just my take so far.
Okay. Do you have your hand up? Councilor White?
Sure, I'll go. Well, I'm wondering why we have the December budget meeting, because there's no mention of it at the beginning of this budget session, because a lot of what Sandy is saying now was said in December. And I'm starting to realize why Oregon's in the top 5 for worst state to retire in, because it's like, it's not sustainable. All these costs are being paid by our citizenry, and every year it goes up. And it goes up again and again and again, and it's like, people are really feeling it. I'm feeling this one, I think people are way more than 2008. Just the price of energy and fuel and food alone has been more crippling than the recession of 08, which we did recover from. But this one, there's no, gas prices don't go down like they go up. And I think we just as a city need to start really getting down to basics, like making the Facebook person a full-time. I know it's popular, but it's not really a job of a city, in my opinion, when the priorities are, infrastructure, streets, parks, police and fire being the 2 top ones. And, we asked for a flat budget and no new hires, knowing that we were facing police and fire increases. If the Gresham levy doesn't pass, we're going to be paying for the problem they've gotten themselves into. And we're also hearing about possibility of tolling roads, waste management contracts up. We're looking at an almost 9% increase in water, sewer, and storm. There's only so much we can cut out, but I think the things that we can cut out, I don't want to do stupid stuff, that hurts us in the long run. But I just want to stay, I don't want to get into scope creep. And I've been very disappointed with the professional services. I think our staff does a much better job than when we hire a consultant. And it's really expensive to hire these consultants. And another things like software, Couldn't we share these softwares with other cities and do a pooling? I don't know how often they even come into play, but they're quite a dramatic cost. And the janitor situation, you know, it sounds great to hire a janitor, but I know we're gonna be hiring 2 janitors and then 3 down the road. That's just kind of how we do things. So I kind of like the idea of having it as an outside service, because if you have a problem with them, you can get someone else to do the job quite easily. You can't if it's a union job. Don't get me wrong, I'm pro-union, but you know, when I was in the union, there were salary caps, and it doesn't seem to be any end in sight for our costs, for the people that live here. And I know smaller cities do a real good job. They look at things they can do collectively to help their citizenry. I don't see us ever really doing that. We've been trying to grow our way out, and we've gotten some great things, but it hasn't stopped the increase to the average citizen. So I'm willing to keep looking at the budget.
Anyone else have any comments? Mr. Rittman.
I'll just say that, first of all, in response to Sandy's comment about being in a savings mode, cities, at least, maybe I've been to too many meetings like this, but cities are not set up to be in a savings mode. It isn't, we should do the things we want to do and budget accordingly and pay for them out of the taxes. But my immediate concern is if there was a big slush fund off to the side that was in savings, wait till the next union negotiations come up or something. I mean, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work for government. We need to do it as people, but I also, I'm hearing a general unhappiness with this budget, but unless there's something specific, and Glenn just mentioned the order FTE for Facebook, that's a specific one, and maybe some others were mentioned, but I just don't, it seems like it's just a general feeling that everything's too much or something, and I guess I don't share that. Troutdale has been fiscally responsible all the time I've been on the council, which I don't even want to tell you how long. And I've been to budget meetings like this year after year, and sometimes we tweak them a little bit, but we end up getting stellar ratings for our fiscal responsibility. And I think the projects and the expenditures that have some flexibility that staff could spend the money if things turn down and we budgeted for a vehicle or something and we don't have we feel it's imprudent. I'm trusting staff to be able to handle it. So I guess while I appreciate everybody's concern about the city's budget continuing to grow, this one, I don't really have anything negative. I'm never happy spending money and laying down taxes and stuff, but I didn't have anything negative. I really didn't. But if people have specifics, I'll listen.
Councilor Richmond.
Just going off of what Councilor Rittman has to say, I believe this budget is a little bit different because we have so much in contingency, because we don't know what is going to happen with Confluence. We don't know what we're going to be spending down there. And it makes me uneasy with all the expenses going on. And you asked for specifics of what we could do. And if we're all uneasy and we're uneasy with the recession, pending recession that could be coming, and wanting to put projects to the side, just look at parks. You take the major projects on parks, just say, hey, we're gonna put that off for a year. There's $1 million right there. We just say, hey, we're just gonna put those projects on hold for a year. Just gonna play it safe, make sure that we have those funds available for the Confluence site. Make sure that we're not gonna be dipping too much into contingencies. And we could feel better about the budget at least.
What projects,
I just,
Yes. No, I'm sorry, Victoria, hang on a second. Mayor Lauer was in front of you.
Well, I mean, if Jordan, Councilor Wichman wants to continue.
Okay.
Continue.
Well, that's specifically like skate park, dog park. I know on the projects line of just the parks in general, and I can look it up again, was over $1 million. So if you take all those major projects and just put them on hold for a year, there's $1 million that we're not necessarily scratching off. We could just say, hey, we're just putting it on hold to the next budget cycle.
With the chair's permission, just to debate it just for a second, I mean,
Yes.
those dog park and skate park have been in the budget, as I recall, for years. And they don't get built for other reasons. They're there. You can take them out, but I guess I'm just not, all right.
And just to rebut back, we've also been talking about the Confluence site for 20 years. And we want to make sure we get this done correctly to leave a legacy behind. And we don't want to scrimp and save. And as Councilor Glantz said, that it's important to me as well. It is a top priority. And I don't think that's where we should, we need to have something in contingency there so that we are ready to pull triggers and move forward there.
So you're thinking take out the line item for the skate park and the dog park, just take them out?
Yeah.
Okay, hang on a second. Mayor Lauer.
So, I appreciate Councilor Glantz's concerns, and I'm tending to lean more towards Council President Ritma on this topic, just because, and I know Sandy doesn't mean this when she was stating her concerns, but to echo what Councilor Ritma says, we have highly qualified staff, we have highly qualified department directors, we have highly qualified employees who aren't going to allow each department to get into a position where they're drastically overspending. And that responsibility to be fiscally responsible falls on the council and this budget committee. So if that ever were to happen, if Ray were ever to come to the city council with Eric behind him and say, hey, we overspent our budget, we dipped into contingency, we've done the worst thing possible that we could have done, and then this recession hit, we need to be the one that holds those people accountable. So the buck stops with us, really. We're going to be the ones, we're stewards of this city and this community and these people's tax dollars. That's what we're here to do. To speak to what Councilor Wittrin just stated, it never gets cheaper to do a project later. So one of the things that changes when we do hold, this dog park probably costs, I'm not going to even say, but it's been on the budget since I've been here. Yeah, and so it's just exponentially getting more expensive as we hold off. City Hall restoration, not to dig up too many skeletons, but that exponentially got more expensive as we stopped and held and waited and decided. And it got to a point where it just didn't make financial sense anymore. So what I don't want to do is put us in a position where we stifle ourselves out of fear and end up putting ourselves a decade or two behind because we didn't want to do something when we had an opportunity to, because of an impending recession that we don't even know how severe or what's going to come, because everything that Eric has presented so far with regards to projections are just that, they're projections based on assumptions, right? So yes, it is scary, and yes, this is a big budget, but our responsibility is even bigger. And so I hold all of us responsible to make sure that this budget is implemented correctly, accurately, and with the same responsibility as you would with your own budget. And so while I think we could go line item by line item and pull things out and decide
as a council and a budget committee to only budget for 4 trucks instead of 8, I would rather rely on our department directors and our administrative staff to make that call, because we trust them to do their job as representatives of the city and community.
Just Victoria.
Okay. On the parks. I've lived here 43 years. I have heard about that dog park forever. We only have $15,000 in the budget for that this year. They've got it started, they've got the spot, let's get it done. I mean, we promised it and promised it and promised it. State Park hasn't been as long, but I've heard that for quite a while. Everybody's all excited about it. I'm wary because of what the vandalism that's been going on at the park. So when I asked about it when they were here, they said that it's gonna be pretty sturdy, but I can see it being graffiti for sure. That's my worry. But I'm sick of us promising everything to everybody and never, ever delivering. Confluence is more than 20 years. I've been on these committees forever. I heard about it and heard, I always joke, I'm gonna be dead before it's ever finished. I mean, after our parks meeting last night, we were talking about nothing ever gets done. Now, the Beaver Creek replacement bridge, that's only in there, but we have to get a grant. And then if we get a grant, then we should go for it. And a lot of things that we have going on right now have grants. We have to do it to get the matching grant. And if we don't, we lose our grant.
I just wanted to say one more thing, Councilor White's comment about the 0.25 for, was it Kevin?
Yeah.
I don't mean to call him out by name, but not knowing his job title, basically for what he does for the city as far as, again, I'm not necessarily sure of his job title, sorry, Kevin, advertising the city and putting us on a different scope rather than in a newspaper and in public meetings like this. Even though these are attended by many, many respected community members, we're a growing city. We're a growing city, and what he does and the reach that he has is insurmountable compared to anybody else in this city. Even if we don't use Facebook personally, the rest of the world does. Even if you don't have a YouTube channel, the rest of the world does. And we're reaching people now more because of the emphasis that we're putting on him. I don't see any net positive for cutting that type of a position. I don't see a net positive for cutting any types of positions if we don't necessarily need to. We're a growing city and we need to be able to reach people to where they're at. And I believe he does a really good job. And as the voice of the city on the internet, I think keeping him, and besides, if he doesn't do it, someone else is going to have to step up and do it also. So that means now we're spreading someone else thin.
Just to be clear, I wasn't asking to cut it. I
Right,
was
right.
asking not to increase it.
Yeah, yep.
Because I compare, the importance of Facebook versus the importance of police and fire response time.
Oh,
That's kind of
absolutely.
where I was coming from.
Yep.
I'd love to have it all, but it's getting tight out there. I'm hearing it from our citizens. And our growth is kind of flat. We're about out of space, unless we start going vertical and more apartments and higher density, which I don't think people really want.
You got a follow-up?
On the tech position, I agree with the mayor. It has never been so easy to find things on our website as it is now.
That's a different position, so.
That's the same position.
It's the same position, and
Yeah.
he supports all three of the websites, and
No,
he
he
does all of our
does it all.
social media. He's our digital media specialist is the
Yeah.
title.
Thank you.
He does all that.
You were looking for,
Who's
so.
Eric then?
with all due respect, I agree with you 100%. And I'll say this, okay, it's political suicide for me, but I'll say it anyhow. There isn't anything in this budget that isn't worthy and important. But like you said, you said, okay, we're responsible for it. And that is true. And if the team's okay with it, I'm okay with it. But here's the thing. The budget committee is saying you can spend $23 million. And this is the end of it for us. We pass it off and we may still be responsible for it, but we don't have any control over it once it leaves this place. And do I trust the staff that we have? Absolutely. But I'm also saying, because I've heard this said at council meetings, it was in the budget. Budget committee said it was okay. And you made the comment, Victoria, and I love you for it. You said, we have to do the things that we say we're going to do. And if we do the things that we say we're going to do, we're going to be down to 2.4 million. Or best case scenario, probably 5.4 million. And all I'm saying is, if we do that, we're going to have to make some, if that happens, and it may happen, it may not happen, it's going to be a really rough ride next year because we won't have the flexibility to do what we want to do.
But what if we sell the property? Then we'll have more income. I mean,
there's no assumption that there'll be income from the property.
No, I'm just saying, but we still have that great asset that's sitting there. I mean, we're not getting it, no, we're selling it, correct?
I wouldn't count on any income coming in from that property.
I think Vice Chair is just saying that there's a possibility there.
There is a possibility.
Yeah,
I'm just saying I wouldn't count on it. And so, I don't want to be argumentative. I'm just looking at it. I'm looking like our revenue has gone up 600 and some odd thousand since 2021-22, right? Our police and fire contracts have gone up almost $1 million. Our staff direct costs have gone up 800,000 in the general fund, okay? And materials services about 600,000 against a revenue of 600,000. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm trying to get where we're going. And it just seems like we're in a tough spot. I think we're going further into the hole. And if that's what we choose to do, that's what we choose to do. But as I said in the beginning, this is just me. I think if we're going to do this, we shouldn't make staff own it, we should own it. We should decide, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it. That's just me personally. I don't want to put it on the council. I don't want to put it on staff. I want to put it on the budget committee.
If we cut a lot, it's going to come on council anyways, because then staff's going to come and say, well, you had an opportunity to approve a budget with programs, projects, staff, everything. Recession didn't hit. Everything's not as bad as we thought. Now we're going to come in front of the council and ask for budget amendments. So it's going to be put on council regardless, and I'm fine with that. But what I don't want to do is shortchange or hamstring our staff by cutting our budget preemptively out of fear, and then not giving them the tools to do projects that, again, we as counselors that are sitting here ask them to do for the community. Right. So again, I hear your concern and appreciate it. I just don't want to do anything preemptively and then take our ability to continue to offer the level of service our community deserves because of what we did here. And in saying that, again, I really do absolutely have 100% trust in our staff and our department directors to come to us and say, you budgeted for $1 million worth of park projects. It is not responsible for us to do that, regardless of the community saying these projects have been on the budget for 20 years, some, not all. We're not in a position where we're gonna just start knocking things off the list because it wouldn't put us in a good financial position. I would rather have that decision process happen than us just cut it out and then leave them with no option other than coming to council and redoing it that way. I see this budget as a document of due diligence and time and work done by our staff. And they presented this 264-page document, not 262, right? 264-page document with confidence, like Councilor Ritma and stated earlier, that this is an all-encompassing document. This is everything that we could do if we wanted to, and we've appropriately budgeted for that. Now, whether they do it, everything in each line item, granted, part of it's up to them, but part of it's up to us too, and I respect that as well. So, but I'm just more, I'm more comfortable than not with it.
Mr. Young.
Just a couple comments. There is, in the $1.7 million general fund capital outlay budget, pretty much 90% is probably discretionary. You could cut it out. I mean, I look at this list and I added up, there's $350,000 of the general fund for ADA improvements. Legally, you might get away with 1 year and not spend it. Cut that 350 out, we don't do anything to improve ADA. But that just pushes it down the road. It's kicking the can because the next budget year, we're gonna have to start picking up and doing more of it because we're required under federal law to make progress toward these ADA improvements. And 1 year, is the feds gonna get excited about us? Probably not. The parking lot repairs and paving, can the parking lot here next to the CBC go another year and not get paved? Sure, it just gets graveler, looks bad, but you still have to do it someday. And the income, absolutely, we should be concerned the impacts of a recession. But if you look at all of the income detail, which is in your budget from 2020-21, the first year of COVID, and the second year of COVID, 21-22, the economy was hit pretty hard, just like a recession in terms of things. And there are items, and it's interesting to look at the gas tax or the business income tax. There wasn't a huge reduction in those amounts. And in fact, during those 2 COVID years that were hit the worst, there really wasn't a huge impact on the Troutdale budget because the Troutdale budget of income is different than, I give an example of Metro's or the City of Portland's. Metro's budget was hit really hard because they have a ton of income from doing events, whether it's people coming to the zoo or it's doing conventions. And so COVID or a recession really hurts those kind of really discretionary activities that people do, and they might experience that. The City of Portland, they have millions and millions of dollars that come in through parking tickets. Well, COVID, nobody goes downtown for COVID, or because of, I'll just say, other reasons that people don't want to go downtown Portland. They have what are called a lot of transactional income that recessions and or COVID will impact. Honestly, our budget income, if you look at the income and you look at what had happened over the last 3 years during that whole period of COVID, we did not have a significant impact in terms of our income. And I would anticipate, and Eric is a better financial person than I am on these ideas, that in everything I've read, I mean, I think, I read at least every day, trying an article about when is this recession coming that we've been told about for so long. And last I heard, they're all over the board, the experts. Yes, we're gonna have one. No, we're not gonna have one. There's a 30% chance we'll have one this next year. We don't know, but I can say is that the way our income is situated, we're different than a lot of other government agencies, and it shouldn't generally have a significant impact on our income. But as I said earlier, Eric and I pay attention to that stuff. And if there's a consensus, what I would prefer to have, if the budget committee recommends this to council and council says, Ray, Eric, I'd like you to tell staff to slow down on anything discretionary for the first 6 months. If that's what council votes and gives us that direction in a resolution, it's not binding, but if I don't do it, you fire me, okay? But if that's the direction from council, then we have to look through this list and say, all right, what can we slow down until January 1st. And then we reevaluate. So that is what, if there is a consensus to do something like that because of concerns, I would say I would prefer, based upon the trust that I know we have from you, is to give us a general direction to do something like that and allow staff to make the wise decision as to where they think. Because the problem is, you're putting up a dartboard, you're throwing darts to figure out, well, let's cut this thing out of a line item. Well, let's cut, and it's like, all right, well, is one more important than the other? Well, you have to ask staff in that department. So I would rather just have some general, if there is a concern, I'm not asking you for this motion, but if there is a consensus concern that we should give some cautionary warning to staff about this concern, it would be something like that to direct us to please be very cautious on any discretionary fund spending, and then we reevaluate it sometime. But that's all I gotta say.
Councilor Glantz.
Yes, I did mention recession, but my true concern is police and fire. And Parks Department does, and the Parks Committee does a great job. But I've heard a lot of the concerns are over things like, on a skate park, what happens if some of the bad people start hanging out? Which brings me back to looking at our primary concerns, which are police and fire, and obviously our infrastructure. Personally, I don't think a recession is going to happen, but I'm going to go with Eric being a lot smarter in that area than me and having better resources. And I do like, I think it was somebody mentioned about maybe having some kind of either tabletop or something where we can kind of dive a little deeper into how the priorities are picked out of this. Here's the store, what are you going to put in your shopping cart? And then lastly, I don't know that this is out of fear. I just feel like this is being financially responsible. If, I know I'm going to get pregnant in a year, I'm going to start saving money. Not that I could, but you know what I'm saying? If I know that there's going to be an expense coming up, I'm going to start preparing for it before it happens. And then one last question, can budget make the request of kind of slow spend or something like that? Or does that have to come through council?
I believe that would come through council.
Thanks.
Commissioner Whitford.
Yeah, and talking about the slow spend and possibly council making that recommendation, I guess to go hand in hand with that, I would also say, can we get a regular update with council and a forecast regularly from staff of where they're forecasting to be, where the spends are coming up in the near future. These are our capital expenses that we're forecasting, and get more in tune with the pulse of where we're going to end up as the year progresses. I think I'd like to feel that a little bit better. And then to comment on Sandy's comment, which I've commented numerous times about police and safety here at Troutdale. Last year during the same session, I had brought up about adding another resource officer to the budget, which went nowhere. December, I also commented on trying to get another resource officer somewhere in the budget. I did not get any traction, but it's going to take a long time to actually get a resource officer. Obviously, our community members are very concerned with public safety, and eventually, I think we got to take a good look at that and see what it's going to take to get it into the budget, or at least have more discussion about it. Hopefully by next year, we could take a serious look at it. I know Ray's looking at trying to get some more hours out of the summer resource officer. And he and I have talked about that, but maybe for next year, we could continue to talk about it. So that's all I got.
Okay.
I got one more comment regarding one of Councilor White's comments about shared services amongst other cities. And maybe this isn't necessarily a budget committee appropriate comment, but we, as not necessarily the 4 mayors of East County, but the 3 mayors, we do talk about exactly that. We talk about ways in the future where the 3 smaller East County cities can join forces and try to save, because I mean, for as much as we're feeling it, Wood Village and Fairview are feeling it even more, in that, and there's other reasons as to why that is, but we do talk about that, and it's something that Ray and I have talked about, not at length, but we've had discussions about it. I don't know necessarily how it would work with things like software license agreements, if we would have to still pay the full sum to be a user on that software licensing, so maybe not necessarily something like that. But if you think about it, and this is a really tough topic, and again, not appropriate for here, but I'm going to say it anyways, we are 3 small cities, but we're pretty similar in the level of service and the type of service we offer as far as public works, parks, streets, community development. There's some areas of the 3 cities that think, hey, why don't we do those things together? Why don't we help each other's budget? Why don't we help each other's community by having the strength of 3 cities focusing on projects instead of just one? So there is talks. It's not talks to become Wood Fairdale. It's not talks like that. Just some talks to maybe think about ways that we can share expenses like, you know, GIS, like SCADA, relatively expensive systems that, yes, are specific to each individual's specific infrastructure, but easily adapted and changeable to encompass others as well. So those are big expenses and things that we can talk about more as a council and on the staff level. I wanted to bring that up before I forgot.
Did you ever hand it to me?
Just one final thought from me
Yes.
is, you know, just until we get a good handle on police and fire, to me, that's my priority. And the smartest thing this budget committee ever did was hire Nick Boyer as he's a police force of one, and I hate to think of Troutdale without him. And so that's where I'd like to see money spent, because I'm not looking forward to this summer. I love summer, but I can already tell you what it's going to be like, and it's coming. That's all I have to say.
Any other comments? Okay, as I said, and I'll just reiterate this, you know, I was looking at this, thinking back, and I've got to work with some great city managers, Ron Garzini, John Anderson, Craig Ward, Dave Nelson, Ray Young, all different, but all similar. And, you know, I was in front of a city council and another city council recently, and I asked for something to be changed, and they said no. And I said, well, I would never do it. And they said, we know that. But they go, our job is to protect the city from whoever replaces you. I just thought that was interesting. And not that we don't know who's going to replace anybody. I got to tell you, right now, I love my council. Don't know a couple of them real well, but I love them. There's been some councils I haven't loved. But, you know, that part's good. But I stress this, and I'm one. I just don't want to be the budget committee that put us into a real interesting place. Because we have a Christmas list that's pretty impressive. And it's only April. And we have a lot of stuff to do. We have a lot of great things to do, and we're gonna have to prioritize. And I just hate putting that on other people. I've never been a kick the can. You guys that know me know I don't like to kick the can down the road. I like to stomp on it. But I think it's just, you know, how we want to go about this.
And Chairperson, just so you'll know, unlike Nick Saban and how he left the Miami Dolphins years ago, if anybody remembers that, honestly, I have
no plans to leave the city during next year's budget year unless I get fired or killed. It's the only two things that will get me out of the city next budget year, just, if that helps you at all.
You just remember you put that juju out in the world.
Yeah. Okay, do you guys want to take a break, or you keep going? Mr. Allen, please.
Can I just say one thing?
Yes, sir.
I realize that what I'm about to say is also political suicide because of the mood of the committee. But maybe through the break, people can forget about it and show some kindness afterwards. I do like that SRO idea. Sorry. Okay. That gives a chance to everybody cooling down break.
What'd you say?
I like the SRO idea, but that's
Resource officer.
that's
The second.
increasing the budget when we're all talking about.
I thought it was gonna be in here.
I did too, actually.
Well, I'd love to do a short report on that. I know I've talked to Councilor Witten and Mayor Lauer about this already. But yeah, we can always put it in there, but again, it just makes the situation more prone to concerns that that's a resource officer costs us about $225,000 a year. So that's a big chunk going into the general fund. But what we're working on now for the 3 months in the summer is that in our contract, they were supposed to provide us 950 hours of beach patrol. Well, I don't need a beach patrol on a Monday when it's raining, okay? I really don't out there. So right now, we're in the middle of working on a MOU, which is just a clearer definition of what that means, and for the particular purpose of, right now, in the way the accounting works, we're not really getting good, effective 950 hours of good police work, whether it's because the deputy sits there on a rainy Monday because they can't leave the park because it's supposed to be a park deputy, or because hours were added into that 950 that were probably, I want to be nice to our friends at MCSO, there weren't necessarily police work going on when they got credited for certain hours. And so we're rearranging that so those 950 hours for this summer, we're actually going to get a better quality amount of police work out of that time to give us some benefit of more police coverage in the city. And so that is a concern that we are worried about, but I'm trying to do it within the amount of money we're paying now to get us more for the same amount of money.
Living across from Glen Auto Park, I fully disagree with that statement. We used to have resource officers, we used to have quad patrols, we would have a officer checking coolers as they go down. And it was like 5 people covering the park. There's nothing else going on in the entire city other than Glen Auto Park in the summertime.
You want to take 10? Sure. Okay. Let's take 10 and come back at, let's go 8:50. Okay. We're in recess. Good evening, everyone. And Ray, did you have some words of wisdom?
No wisdom, just a suggestion.
Chair, really quick, we're missing Chris Varney if you wanted to wait.
Okay.
Just that way he has the full information.
We'll just hang on a second here.
So how was everyone's day?
I saw a bald eagle. Swooped right over me.
Wow. You didn't put its talons in your back.
Going for a goose.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, dude.
Oh, that's really cool.
No.
Goose are tough.
Yep.
The goose outsmarted it?
Yep.
Oh, man, that would have been something to see. Not that I want to see a goose die, that's not what I meant.
I don't say no matter what. I just can't believe it's big.
They're humongous.
Yeah. I look up, I'm like,
They are gigantic.
I see them all the time, every year.
where's the dog? And I'm like, forget it, I gotta take care of myself.
They're constantly robbing with prey from the osprey. Yeah, they'll gang up on an osprey, a couple will gang up on an osprey and get the osprey because
We were
the
supposed
osprey's
to be
better
learning
fisherman.
something and that happened. And then all of us paid attention to the eagle.
That the osprey.
Fishermen and the eagles.
That's correct.
I hear things happen.
That is correct. I don't, you know, with the English, you know, they do 40% of the crop.
No, the recording's off. Okay. Now that we have a full litter, we will go ahead and reconvene the budget committee. All right. And Mr.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things, Eric and I, obviously not having a full discussion on these issues, but one other thing, other than what I suggested earlier about directing staff to be cautious on discretionary expenses the first 6 months of next year. We have every year, obviously, a half-yearly meeting in December, which is 5.5 months into the budget year. Eric and I talked about a couple ways that we could beef up that report, that work session, to give everybody a really pretty good less than half-year checkup on what's going on with income and expenses. You know, every year you do get at that meeting a snapshot of the first 4 months of the year, because all of our financial reporting lags month to 6 weeks behind because of accounting and getting numbers in, is that we can beef up that report that shows you where we're at in status in terms of all of our budget line items, where we're at with spending and income, but also give you the context of what it's been like the years before, so you know there's any significant variations in what we generally anticipate in terms of expenses and income in our budgets at that time, so that can be included into that. The second thing we can do, which is something we've not done before at all, is that our budget contains over $11 million in capital projects. And that's always the thing, is it's always like, well, which ones are really going to get done? Well, what we haven't done before is at that half-year meeting, let's go through those whole lists that are in your budget on the pages of 18 and 19, is that it? No, 18, 19, 20, and 21. In all the departments, we got $11 million. Is we come in, prepare a report, and tell you which ones at 5.5 months of the year, what's getting done, what's not getting done. Just to update you on making sure that, as we always know will happen, they're not all getting done. So they won't impact, and that way you can be reassured. Or we come in and say, my goodness, something miracle happened, and we're doing them all. Well, then maybe you get concerned that maybe we need to slow down on some of them because we didn't anticipate that. So I can definitely see that we can add that to the program to do everything we can to give you the information necessary to know whether you need to be concerned or whether we seem to be on track to, again, continuing to have a positive income versus expense year, which we historically have, because those are just the couple things that we can suggest that might help you feel more comfortable with your oversight of the budget.
Mr. Ben?
Just some general comments. I asked a couple of questions before this meeting started, and I have to say that bless Ray's heart, he did a great job answering all of my questions and or getting the answers for my questions. And in the years I've been on it, that he's been the city manager, I have not found anybody with greater integrity than Ray Young. It means a lot to me, and I take him at his word based on his character and his integrity. And
we did start the recording, didn't we, Sarah?
And one of the questions I asked him was, I was really concerned and not in favor of this 8.5% rate increase on the utilities. And he basically said, sorry, you don't get to vote on it. That is a council issue. But he did say, to address other concerns on that, he says, quote unquote, by adopting a budget with this increase, and then in the following words are in bold, the budget committee is not endorsing that number. So to address your concern about us taking ownership of it, I understand that and I agree to that, with that and whatnot. But as a result, and I brought this issue up to Mayor Lauer on Monday, I don't want the mayor or the city council to, because we as a budget committee approved this number, to think that, well, the budget committee approved it. Yeah, let's go ahead and authorize a contingency or whatever it may be, because the budget committee's already approved it. So I'm going along with like what Ray said, the budget committee is not endorsing that number, because in this case, it's not a number we can endorse or do anyway. But I do want to say that I don't think the council and mayor should approve 8.5%. I would be at best recommending half of that, because I think it's too much under the conditions, economic conditions, that all kinds of people, Glenn and others have said that we're taking a beating as people, a beating, and we don't need, we'll eat part of it, half of it, if the city will eat half of it, and maybe work harder to get lower costs due to inflation and other efficiencies that can help offset that. So I would like to see that.
On that one, I would have to respectfully disagree, because that number, that revenue stream is built into the budget. And if we're approving the budget, let's say as is, we're approving it with those increases in it. And council is, yes, they are the approving body for that, but they would be acting on what is in the budget. Wouldn't that be correct?
It is correct, but I do get where Gene's position is coming from. And basically, I mean, Ray said it best, and I'll just let Ray speak after I say that, you know, the 8.5% increase is a council decision, but you are correct that the budget is hopefully getting approved with that included. Ray, I'll start.
Well, just like the bid income of $1 million plus, just like the gas tax income, all the income numbers in here are what they're going to be. And those aren't something within the budget committee's control. You can't decide what the bid is. You can't decide what the utility rate is. And so you really don't have any ability to change those. And staff has to just estimate what they think it should be or will be, and we put it in the budget, which is wholly different than the expenditure side of the budget, which is you do have direct control of what those numbers are. They are what you approve. The income numbers, I don't know that we've ever had here, you look at the income at the beginning of your budget, all the different sources of income, I don't think there's ever been an actual audited statement that matched any one of those numbers. So we know they will never be the adopted numbers. And so I think it's a fair statement to say that if you approve a budget with that income, am I saying, well, that was an estimate that staff put in there. Council's going to decide. If it's less, it's less. If it's more, it's more. But it is what's going to be next year, and we don't have any control over what the actual number will be. And so that's what we take it as. And the people here are on council, and I think they're hearing that, and they're hearing what Gene said. And I don't know that I ever heard that from the council saying is that budget committee approved that utility increase, so I guess we have to. Believe me, knowing the council and opinions on utility rates, I don't think it's going to matter one whit what the number is in the budget in terms of utility rates when they make a decision on what that will be. So.
And just to finish off what I was saying, I feel comfortable in saying that I can hold and feel comfortable Ray will live up to what he has said. And the rest of his city staff will stand up to that. I feel comfortable in that, but I'll even put more onus on the mayor to make sure the council really bird dogs him and the staff, so we don't get in the position that Tammy very clearly stated.
I will take on that responsibility. The council will as well.
Councilor Glantz?
Yeah, I have one suggestion is that we watch that May 16th Gresham election for their fire and support services. And if that election does not get them the funding they need, that should make us reassess where we're going to be in 2 years versus if that does get approved, I think that puts us in a little better position. And then one other quick comment on our digital media specialist. Met with him a few times. He's underpaid for what he does, and I know people in that industry, so even if we give him that extra time. And the other one I thought was pretty important for us to get through was, I think it was like a 70-year-old that's about to retire in public works, and getting some people in there to learn that tribal knowledge. But there are things like, you know, a dog park or the 2nd Street Bridge that I don't think are nearly as important as keeping the, you know, what we charge for utilities down and other types of things. So that's it. Thanks.
Did you want to?
No, surprisingly, I don't have anything to opine.
All right. Okay, anybody else?
Well, I guess I will opine saying that I'm already making a note on my calendar for next November for Eric and I to meet, to talk about how we're going to add more information to the Happy Early meeting. That way I don't forget my commitments, Gene. I put them on my calendar.
Yes, Mr. Bent.
Oh, one other last comment. For me, just as a priority for me as a citizen and my family and whatnot, fire, police, public works are my priorities because they're my essential services. And I am also in favor of adding an additional resource officer.
Okay.
Down the, you know, next year I'd be all in favor of that. I was involved in that first one that was added that we have now. And I would be all in favor because I think crime is a huge concern. I have neighbors that are, one neighbor in particular that was very anti-gun, is now bought a gun. And he told me why, and the security system. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. Anyone else have anything? Okay, this would be the point that if we're going to make any adjustments to the budget, we do it. Otherwise not. And I've kind of said my piece, I think. Nothing against the council, I love you guys. I just want to feel like I'm doing my job. Okay. Does anybody have anything that they're recommending to be pulled or added at this time? Or do we want a bonfire and put all the books in it and start over or whatever? Okay. Not seeing any.
Shall I proceed, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, unless anyone has any other comments.
Okay, well, the first staff requested motion is related to the property tax levy. So, Mr. Chair, the staff requests that we get a so moved motion that the City of Troutdale Budget Committee approve the property tax levy of the full permanent rate of 3.7652 per 1,000 of assessed value for the fiscal year 2023-2024 for the operating purposes in the general fund.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, she got you. Okay, we have a motion by Mayor Lauer, second by Victoria Rizzo, that the City of Troutdale Budget Committee approve the property tax levy in the full permanent rate of 3.7652 per thousand of assessed value for the fiscal year 23-24 for operating purposes in the general fund. I just want to comment, this is really important because if we don't do this, we won't earn money. It doesn't affect other things, but it does affect whether we're here or not. So any other discussion on the motion? Okay, call it.
Okay. Mayor Lauer,
Yes.
Gene Bent,
Yes.
Counselor Ritma,
Yes.
Counselor Caswell,
Yes.
Chris Barney,
Yes.
Counselor One,
Yes.
Counselor White,
Yes.
Victoria Rizzo.
Yes.
Counselor Wittrin,
Yes.
Rich Allen,
Yes.
Counselor Glantz,
Yes.
and Tammy Stephenson.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Chair, the second staff requested motion is that the City of Troutdale Budget Committee approve the property tax levy in the amount of $256,000 for the fiscal year 2023-24 for payment of the general obligation bond principal and interest and the debt service fund for the police facility bonded indebtedness.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, motion by Counselor Wittrin, second by Mayor Lauer, that the City of Troutdale Budget Committee approve the property tax levy in the amount of $256,000 for fiscal year 23-24 for payment of general obligation bond principal and interest in the debt service fund for the police facility bond indebtedness. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none.
Ready? Jean Bent,
Yes.
Counselor Ripma,
Yes.
Counselor Caswell,
Yes.
Chris Barney,
Yes.
Counselor One,
Yes.
Counselor White,
Yes.
Victoria Rizzo,
Yes.
Counselor Wittrin,
Yes.
Rich Allen,
Yes.
Counselor Glantz,
Yes.
Tammy Stephenson,
Yes.
and Mayor Lauer.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Chair, the final staff requested motion is that the City of Troutdale Budget Committee approve the entire proposed budget for fiscal year 2023-2024 in total as proposed and corrected.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mayor Lauer, second by Victoria Rizzo, that the City of Troutdale Budget Committee approve the entire proposed budget for the fiscal year 23-24 in total as proposed and corrected. Any discussion on the motion?
Counselor Ripma,
Yes.
Counselor Caswell,
Yes.
Chris Barney,
Good thing.
Entirely sure.
You want us to come back?
come back around.
Can we do that?
Sure. Counselor One,
Yes.
Counselor White,
No.
Victoria Rizzo,
Yes.
Counselor Wittrin,
Yes.
Rich Allen,
Yes.
Counselor Glantz,
No.
Tammy Stephenson,
No.
Mayor Lauer,
Yes.
Jean Bent,
Yes.
and back to Chris Barney. Right, so that is 8 affirmatives.
I'm sorry.
That is 8 affirmatives.
Okay.
Okay, that passes. All right.
So, closing comments from either of you?
No, all I'll say is that, thank you for approving the budget. I want you to know that these discussions, from everyone and the comments made by everyone actually puts a lot of pressure on me to make sure I protect your finances in the city. So I appreciate everyone's comments on both sides of how the budget should be viewed, because I take your comments seriously, even the 5 that voted no, because I care about making sure that I just don't answer to the majority, but I answer to all of you. And so thank you for the added pressure to make sure we have the adequate resources to meet the needs of police and fire and other things down the road. And I'll just say thank you for that.
I want to thank everyone for all the time and the effort they put into the budget and the discussions that we've had. I think have been pretty robust and positive. And I just really appreciate working with all of you in this role. I want to thank you for that.
If I, really quick, I
Yes.
just wanted to say that I think these discussions that we have is the important part of what this body is here to do. And so to put that added emphasis and to put that pressure on city staff is important. And I just want to also say thank you to Chair Stephenson for his leadership during this process.
Yes. Good job.
Anyone else have anything?
Sure, Steph.
Yes.
So, yeah, just to bring up that with the concerns that we've heard tonight, I think staff has gotten the message that even many of us who voted yes for it do have our concerns, so we do want them to watch and continue to be conservative as they have in the past and what they've said so far.
Thank you. Councilor Glanz?
Yep, I just wanted to thank everybody else on the committee and especially Chair Stephenson. I know it's not easy keeping all of us corralled, and also thank the staff for all their work.
Yeah, I did want to echo with Rich's, even those of us that said yes, there are concerns, and for either me personally as a city councilor or as a council as a whole, I do hope and expect that we will see updates, but updates for forecasting of where we're going to end up on this cycle as well as next year, right? And then I also wanted to thank Tanny. Tanny's led us, been great through all of his endeavors with the city. He is very professional, and we appreciate everything you do. Thank you, Tanny.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Bennett?
Just want to reiterate my desire and hope that the mayor and city council will hold the city staff's feet to the fire on everything that's been discussed. I'm in the same boat as Jordan and Glenn and Rich that I wavered a little bit on there, but whether I was going to go yes or no, and the doggone city manager, I don't know. He has this tendency to influence me. I'm not sure why, but anyway, mayor and council, if you guys just be damn sure that you on a regular basis keep track of what's income, revenue, expenditures, because there are some really important things out there that Councilor Glantz and others have said that are real concerns. So please follow through and make it happen.
All right. If there isn't anything else, oh boy.
Since you want updates, I want you to put it on your calendars right now. We'll be back right here in this room. There's the dates. You know, and since you're so excited, there's next year's dates. Go back there, another one. Wow, please. December.
December 5th.
It was December 7th.
Give me that. That's your birthday? Oh, dang. Then it has to be that day.
I move we adjourn.
Seconded.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
How old are you?
Oh, my next grade.
Yeah.